What is going on, future me? Of course, as with every week, want to get straight into my pre-market plan for this coming week. Of course, we are just coming off of the first week of the year, the new year. And with that, the market has been sitting up very nicely. Got to get a lot of the nonsense out of the way as far as price action is concerned. Everything's retraced where it's needed to be. And overall, as I mentioned, things are setting up pretty nice. So with that in mind, just to jump straight into it, we have the dollar, the daily for the dollar pulled up at the moment. And I know that I mentioned in my previous pre-market plan that I wasn't expecting any sort of retest, anything like that, anything crazy. That's exactly what we got, especially with it being NFP week. There were a lot of different catalysts, of course, different news releases that would act as drivers for volatile price action. And that's exactly what we got. Nothing super out of the ordinary though. Nothing super, stepping super far outside of the scope of expectations. We've basically just retested the level we previously broken out of, this bouncer break level, and now we're sort of ranging between this range low and this bouncer break sort of range high. Honestly, the way that the weekly's looking, I'll get into it in a second. I would expect this very short-term level of structure to break at some point to the downside, especially again when you look at higher time frame stuff. Look at the weekly. Look at this weekly candle. Absolutely disgusting. Huge wood to the upside. Did not get to create any sort of momentum or anything of that sort. Just completely wicked into the zone we previously broke out of and rejected with a very weak candle close. Excuse me, on that most recent week's candle. And then when we look at it on the monthly as well, like this just makes a case for even more downside potentially into, if we break 103 with strength potentially into 100 type of thing, where we have a lot of these wicks, a lot of these candle closes here as well, could kind of call this a range mid within this 93 range low and that 103 range high. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. I don't want to spend, at least this week, I don't want to spend a ton of time on indexes just because it's so straightforward, right? CPI is coming out this week, I believe, on Wednesday. Excuse me, Thursday. And with that, especially since CPI was a little bit low, like 3 basis points lower than expected last month or the last time it was released, we could expect, right? Like if we see lower CPI numbers, even if it's just by a bit, even if it's just a little bit lower than expectations, that could be just enough to make the dollar tank, right? Because I mean, again, with that being that we're getting a handle on inflation, quote unquote, that typically weakens the dollar as inflation prints lower. So, with that observation in mind, especially with the way the chart looks now, right? Like, look at this monthly chart. Look at this, this crazy wick to the upside, crazy wick rejection to the upside, right? Like you would assume. I mean, obviously, we're not gonna break 103 until we break it, right? Like, until the chart shows me that. But we could assume that we're gonna start building up momentum to the downside, especially once we see what's going on with the CPI numbers. So that's something that I'm going to be looking forward to in the coming days for this week. So that's kind of the main observation. Jumping straight into JPYBasket, it's pretty crazy. I'm almost interested in entertaining some sort of reversal on JPYBasket if we break back below 8,000. The reason why I mention this is because obviously we're seeing yen weakness at the moment, and we're now seeing the pound start to gain a little bit of strength. Overall, still the same sentiment that I was last week, right? Like we did get that strong move up. Basically testing this previous level of structure here. I can actually drag this over just so that it looks a little bit clearer. There we go, beautiful. Let's make sure that lines up. There we go. Let me just drag this one here as well, just so that everything is copacetic. So with that said, right, we did get a chance to rally a bit higher into that previous liquidity zone. Did get knocked back to retest literally the same exact zone we broke out of last week. So with that in mind, or rather the week prior to last week. So with that in mind, right, I'm honestly playing it the same exact way until we get a break back below 8,000 and like a range reclaim below 8,000. So of course I would still expect a rally from this particular level, especially because again it is a very respected level looking left. We've tested this level as an SR zone many times. So with that, as we're now printing above it, we could expect ourselves to kind of range between, or at least tag this range low a few times prior to making that definitive move up. But once again, especially as I mentioned, going into the pound in a few minutes, we are seeing a little bit of pound strength. So with that, as I mentioned many times, I would like these two charts to remain decoupled. So that might just muddy up the plans a bit. But when we look at the weekly, right? Look at this this range high on the weekly. This is something that I spelled out as well last week, mentioning that hey, we are building momentum, we are building strength into that range high, but resistance is still resistance. So it's still something that we're going to need to take into consideration and kind of respect as far as a level of structure is concerned. And that's exactly what's going on, right? It's acting as resistance. Got a long wick rejection into that range high before moving lower. Of course, as long as we're playing around between this range mid and range high, I'm not gonna suspect anything crazy like a super crazy move to the downside. Once we do break this range mid though, obviously playing at level to level as I always do, I will be expecting a move into that range low, which could spell out a reversal for GJ, right? Because again, being that we've seen so much yen strength, we're now seeing GJ shorts. Or the last week or so, we've been seeing GJ shorts. We've now tagged a very respected level of support on GJ as well, especially being we slid pretty far to the downside. So with that, it's only right that we start to find stability and at least retrace and reverse back to the upside. So that could be a part of what we're seeing here within the indexes is that of course yen weakness correlates very well with the GJ retrace to the upside that we're seeing here as well. Once again, I would like to see the JPY basket range mid broken to make that definitive in my mind. Otherwise, we're just getting knocked back from the range high because that's what we're supposed to do. It's resistance. But yeah, I hope that makes sense. Looking at it on the monthly here as well, we're still pretty early into the monthly candle, especially after the prior to monthly candle closes. You could expect a little bit more like momentum, right? Like you would think, but especially coming into this channel here as well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, potentially a sixth touch of this channel. Definitely makes a case for why we would be rejecting here as well, outside of the fact that we're already at the range high on the weekly, and then on the daily, also hitting liquidity zones and SR levels from the past as far as 84.50 is concerned. So once again, just to kind of sum it up, being that we're still above the 8,000 SR level that we printed out of and broke out of, I would still expect a move into 8,400 to see more yen upside. It's not until we break back below 8,000 and reclaim that weekly range mid as well that I will be sort of switching sides in that regard. So going into JPY, GBP futures, this is exactly what I was mentioning here last week as well. This sort of this microstructure around 119. We did get a little bit of stability here. We can also kind of call this like a range mid here as well. If I just drag it up a little bit, like right here. We can also call this like a range mid that we found stability at this little microstructure. Overall, I'm not, similar to JPYBasket, I'm not entertaining anything too crazy. I'm not gonna call necessarily for reversals just yet until we get this reclaim back above the 122 sort of area. This last daily candle close, the most recent one, it does have some steam on it, right? Like it's a solid body close to the upside, no topside wick at all. It's strong. It's a strong candle overall. So with that, it does make a case for the reclaims of that 122 area. And overall, as I mentioned in the past, this would still work in my favor. In that, of course, my bias would switch, but the two indexes, the JPY and the GBP indexes, would remain decoupled. Obviously, with GBP going up, yen finding weakness now. So those are two levels I'm going to be watching as far as JPY is concerned. Obviously, the 8,000 level and the 8,400 level, and then here for GBP futures, of course, looking for that reclaim of 122 and the more upside. And then on the other side of that, I mean, if we start to see more weakness and reclaim the ranges below 117, looking pretty nasty for GBP. And then also, right, like looking at it on the weekly, excuse me. Let's move this here. Let's move this here. I could even take this. I believe this is like a 382 retrace. Swing low to swing high. Oh, not even. So we still do have a ways to go, right? As far as retrace levels are concerned, but this is a level. So that's the thing, right? This is a level of structure. This is a range level. Look at how many times that the that prices come here, tested, and found stability before moving higher. And that's exactly what we're seeing here, right? Long wick rejections to the downside, building a little bit of a base, a little bit of stability. Obviously, we needed a couple more weekly candles to make that definitive for us. Also have this potential inverse head and shoulders and everything else. Could also call this like a cup and handle. Definitely makes a case for further upside on GBP futures. And again, this all I just try to piece all these little parts of the puzzle together, especially being that again, we've just seen so much downside momentum on GJ. We've literally tagged previous ranges from months ago, like a year ago type of thing. It's only right that we continue to see retracements into these coming weeks and let kind of the market stabilize itself, like bring itself back to where, to a mean, like, sort of a mean reversion, so to speak. So with that said, it makes sense that, right, we would see yen weakness, that we would see GBP strength, because as you can see on the GJ chart, when I get into it, price is trying to retrace and claw itself back to where it once was. So I hope that makes sense. Overall, I feel like it's pretty straightforward for the pound. Nothing super crazy as far as news is concerned for the pound this week. There is a GDP on Friday, but nothing super out of this world. Going straight into GJ, let's go ahead and look at the weekly, because the weekly, honestly, the weekly lines up perfectly with what I'm mentioning with the reversal on the yen, and then obviously the pound strength, right? Once again, I can delete this because this already played out. Once again, we're playing around at ranges from weeks ago. And with that in mind, that was once a very important range high, now turned into a range low, right? A level of liquidity. Look at all these wicks here. Look at all these, all the times that we've tapped into the zone, never broken it, and everything else. And that's exactly where we're at with the weekly right now, along with rejection to the downside. We've printed above that previous weekly range high. And, it's only right that we see some sort of retrace of this move, right, before further downside, whatever it might be. So, I mean, obviously swing low or swing high to swing low. We have the 382 here at that weekly range mid, and then obviously a little bit higher than that trend line retest in confluence with the 618. Adds a ton of context. Of course, I always like to look at intraday stuff prior, but on the weekly, definitely making a big case for if nothing else, a bullish retracement prior to rolling over on itself and going lower. But with that said, right, like we even look back, because this is a range back here that I traded for a very long time, and even though the candles are a little bit more crazy, there's a lot more wicks and in recent price action, it's pretty much the same exact move, right? Like it's literally the same exact structure. It looks exactly the same in some sense as well. And one observation that I can make from the past that's kind of concurrent with the present is that every time we come into this range low, no matter what, that weekly range low, we always bounce. And what do we see that's similar up here? Every time we come into this range low, we always bounce. This is our third time bouncing. So we could expect, of course, a third bounce at this particular point. How I want to play it, I'll get into that shortly. So with that, right, just kind of lining up with that analysis I just made, right? There are a couple of things I'm looking at. Obviously, we have now this lower low and lower high structure kind of playing out. On the daily, we just got this lower high, lower low here as well. I'm talking more recent price action. I'm nothing to do with the events in September of the 28th, whatever it was, because this was a news event actually that that made price go down. That I believe it was the Bank of Japan intervening or whatever the case. It doesn't matter. With that, we have this lower low and lower high sort of structure forming, right? We have this most recent lower high. We have this lower low here as well. Now we also have this level at 160, this sort of range mid within this range high and range low at 158. If we can continue to see rejection and further downside here, right, of course, that would be the lower high that we're looking for. But if this thesis that I have about obviously this bigger retracement because we're at the weekly range low plays out, we could be seeing strong reclaims into 162, right? And it's not until we kind of break above 162, retest and go higher that I would want to be switching my bias overall, especially because again, these are we're kind of breaking market structure all over again. In that, of course, this is a lower high, right? So if we break above that lower high, it's no longer right, no longer a lower high, it's a new high, low, and then higher high, and so on. So with that in mind, again, one or two scenarios, I would like, of course, if I'm going to continue to take shorts, I would like to see this lower high continue to remain solid into the market open. If not, if we continue to get retest into 162, of course, rejections of 162 are valid to me, and I would trade that. I would short 162 all day as long as we're seeing weakness there. But if we start to see strength and breaks above 162, potential retest above 162, I would then have to kind of reevaluate my bias and say, do I want to wait till 164 to confirm whether or not I want to switch bullish, or do I want to wait till wait till 164 to see the neckline retest to get bearish thereafter? That's kind of a game time decision I'll make. Honestly, just being that obviously I'm making the plan right now, I would wait until 164 just to kind of confirm, make sure that we're not going to see any crazy retest before a big swing lower. But overall, once again, breaks above 162 are they are bullish, right? It's a shift in structure, from being bearish to back into being bullish as it was. So that's kind of how I'll be playing it, right? If 164 breaks, I'll be playing it level to level from there. I'll be wanting to see where price settles as well to see if I can catch a short, higher up, maybe a higher retracement level, whatever it might be. Because even when I throw my fibs on this here as well, right? Like I have swing high to swing low. 164 lines up perfectly with the 618 as well, right? So, and even 166 with this level of structure here lines up with the 786 here as well in confluence overall. So definitely levels I'm going to be wanting to wait on as far as letting price get there, settle, see whether or not it's going to reject or move into it with momentum, and then take my trade thereafter. But once again, going to be watching, of course, 162 and 164, waiting for rejections of those two levels. If we break above 164 with strength and start printing with momentum above 164, I may just have to reevaluate. I may just have to reevaluate my bias. But that's that. Honestly, I it's so funny. I still don't feel really comfortable taking longs below the June high. So I think that's something that I might have to evaluate if price does get to 164, 166 areas. But as it stands, again, I'm still of the sentiment that I'm wanting to get short at the 618 here at 164. If it breaks above 164, I'll reevaluate. Because once again, we're at the weekly range low. That is a level that we bounce from time and time again, and you just have to respect that. That's just what the market is telling us at the moment, right? So I can't just impose my will on the market, unfortunately. But this is part of what kind of strengthens my conviction in shorts. This is a very clean level of structure. Just look at this. This is the August 22 low. This is a level that we bounced from in the past prior to making a big move lower. If we look left, we've bounced from here many, many times. And we're kind of turning this into an SR level here as well, right? Like we've used it as support many, many times, and now look at us coming into it as resistance. So this is our first time testing this level as resistance, if I'm not mistaken, in recent history. Yeah, absolutely. So with that in mind, I would want to see a rejection here and short it level to level from the August 22 low into 156, this previous range mid here as well. It'd be a 1 to 3 beautiful trade. Especially the way that it lines up. Once again, this is a level that we previously broken out of, a very strong SR level, liquidity zone, whatever you want to call it. Now seeing that retrace also in confluence with the 618, did get a knockback here, starting to see wicks and everything else. Definitely adds a ton of conviction for shorts here, right? Again, at the market open, I'm going to want to see how, obviously I don't trade Sundays, but at the market open, I'm going to want to see how price is reacting to this SR level, to the August 22 low, to the 618, to see if we can see something definitive enough to call it weakness and short it from there, because that's exactly where I want to short. I also have another level up here. There are actually three levels. Of course, the 618 I want to get short. The 160, 161 sort of area I'd want to get short here as well. And then, of course, 162 where we initially rejected. This was a beautiful trade that I ended up missing. I was sleeping this week. I actually didn't trade any trades this week. So with that in mind, you can see why here as well, right? Like why I would call reversals above 162 into 164 kind of bullish, because this is the entire market structure as it stands, right? If we get a break and retest above this and a break and retest above 164, we're pretty much asked out, right? Like we're breaking back into previous ranges, this range low or this previous range low to make a move into that June high there as well. So that's kind of my sentiment, why I mentioned what I mentioned on the daily about breaks above 164 being potentially bullish. because when you look at it on the 4 hour here as well, the structure is just so clean. Obviously, lower high, low, another lower high here as well. Need to make a lower low if we want to respect the current market structure. And of course, it's up to the market to do so, not me. I'm just here to take the trades. Excuse me. So with that in mind, that's how I'll be playing it. Of course, we have those 3 levels here: 162, 161, and then 160. If the market opens with weakness, of course, Monday I'll be wanting to take shorts from this August 22 low into the range mid at 156. Breaks above 164 are temporarily bullish until I see where price settles. 1 hour. Let's see. This is kind of an example of the play that I want to take right at the open. Because I mean, price is trading so close to my invalidation already, right? Like, it's already at the August 22 low. It's at a weekly candle low here as well. We have this local high and everything else. With a 1 to 3, it's absolutely beautiful. If it breaks the local highs, I'm wrong anyway. So that's part of the reason why I have this short position tool open as well. Once again, I don't trade Sundays, so I'm not going to be in the market on Sunday, but I will be on if I see something, I'll be there on Monday. So always good to just kind of put things into perspective and see where I need to be. Also, just something to kind of add, we also have this potential ascending triangle here as well. So we have, I want to call it, it is a range, and I do play range breakout, so we could call it kind of a breakout play here as well. Either, we squeeze into the ascending triangle and break 160 and continue higher. Especially on the 1 hour, we are sort of forming this bullish structure. And then on the other side of that, we continue to squeeze and move lower. Obviously, big wick projections into this last week candle low here as well. Huge nasty wick back here from the news on last Thursday there also. So again, one of two things: either we get the ascending triangle play into 161 and higher than that, or we reject from these August 22 lows and last week candle lows into previous levels. One being, of course, the last week candle low at 158.76 or 56, excuse me, and then lower than that. So that's kind of how I'll be playing it. Of course, as far as how I'd like the structure to look, although these things don't line up, beautifully every time, I can definitely draw some arrows and everything else. So of course, I would wait for something like this, get the retest, and boom, that would be ideal. And then as far as structure is concerned, I think for this particular setup, it looks just a little bit cleaner on the 4 hour here as well. I'd want to see long wick rejections of that 618 to get short. And of course, as far as what that would look like from a price action point of view, of course, I'm taking shorts all day inside of this box, as long as we see weakness below this box. So I hope that makes sense. Nothing super crazy. I think it's pretty straightforward overall. I'm literally just shorting rejections of these different levels on GJ. Once again, if we see weakness at this, did not mean to do that. If we see weakness at this 618, at this level at 160, I'll be wanting to short that. If we see it at 161, I'll be wanting to short that. If we see it at 162, I'll be wanting to short that. Breaks above, I'll just be sitting on my hands and seeing where price settles, especially if we break above 164. If we see weakness at 164, I will short that. But that is kind of my plan for GJ. I hope that makes sense. Nothing super crazy. Let me get this fib off of here. It looks insane. Okay. But yeah, I hope that made sense. Ascending triangle or squeeze to the downside on the 1 hour. Moving into gold. Gold is looking crazy. I missed like 3 opportunities on gold. Definitely kicking myself. I've said many times here as well that we were wanting to see strength into this weekly range mid to continue to see upside, and that's exactly what we just saw. I would not be surprised if we get a retest of the 1820s or 1830s prior to moving higher into the 1900s. Obviously, when we move with this much momentum, especially look at it on the weekly, right? It's only right that we see price starting to retrace and find floors to build stability on before moving higher. So I would not be surprised whatsoever if we see a retrace early in the week for gold, and it'll make a ton more sense as I get into intraday levels. as you see here on the daily, we're pretty much pushing up pushing up against a very respected level of resistance, this sort of range mid here as well. And as you can see, this particular instance here, I believe this was in May of 22 or June of 22. It says we did range in between these levels for quite a while, but we were in a downtrend, right? So now being in an uptrend, could we expect to see something, similar? We start to range in between the 1820s, 1830s, and the 1860s prior to a breakout higher. Who knows, right? I don't have a crystal ball by any means, but with that in mind, being that there's so much traffic and consolidation in this particular range, I wouldn't be surprised if we're playing around here for a little bit, especially again, seeing retraces into 1830 before big pops and everything else, and squeezing before we see a move to the upside. And one thing I do want to make an observation on here as well is this small trend line. I've highlighted this in the 4-hour and the 1-hour in the past as well. But anytime we see this fickle sort of trend line, that's very I would almost call it like a deceiving looking like ascending triangle, because it definitely isn't that. But with that said, anytime we have these very steep upward trend lines, at least on intraday levels, we always see a big pop to the upside, always a big breakout, reminiscent of an ascending triangle. So I don't know if that's what we see here, but I could definitely make a case for potentially ranging and retracing within this range, building stability, and then moving higher thereafter. And then when we look at it on the 4-hour, it always becomes a ton clearer. Just look at these levels of structure, right? Range lows extremely respected, wicked into it twice. Obviously at SR level here as well, we've used it as resistance in the past, resistance, and not a ton of traffic here as well. So overall structure is very clean. That's what honestly, I've been loving gold a little bit more than GJ, and I started trading GJ first. So I really enjoy the cleanliness of structure, the way that obviously respects these different levels and everything else. And it's gold, right? So it's going to be extremely volatile, but it still does, use historical price data in, it considers it in its movement. So definitely appreciated on that. Thank you, gold. But yeah, so overall structure is pretty clean on the 4-hour here as well. No super crazy traffic. Again, you can see the super well-defined structure of this SR level, obviously coming into it multiple times on both sides. Looking at it on the 1-hour, or rather, excuse me, before I get into that, on the 4-hour, of course, wicks and plays into 1829 valid. I'm taking buys at 1829 all day every day. 1805 I'm taking buys all day every day. 1786 I'm taking buys all day every day, no question. Again, I'm still of the same sentiment, although 1786 is a bouncer break level for me at the moment, especially since we've been above that level for so long. 1756 is the real last resort bouncer break level. So I am long regardless, as long as we are above 1756 and the 1780s overall. Once again, I would take longs at 1829, 1805, and 1786, no questions asked. Otherwise, I'm pussy. And last week I was. I'll 100% admit that I still stuck to my plan, but I did not take any trades because I was sleeping. Nothing comes to a sleeper but a dream. So with that in mind, we do have a couple of extra levels here as well on the 1-hour, and especially with the way that the 1-hour closed, the way that gold closed overall with this sort of rounded top, we can definitely make a case for us wanting to retrace. Perfect level for that. Swing low to this swing high, the most recent. We have a beautiful level here, the 618 in confluence with the last week candle mid, also a level that we've used, as it is a sort of range mid, and we've also used it as an SR level in the past here as well. 2 touches as resistance, a couple touches here as support here as well. So definitely makes a beautiful case for why we would want to retest that level before moving higher. If we retest a little bit deeper than that, absolutely fine. I'll be, of course, wanting to wait for the 1830s and 1825 sort of region. In between this area is all good. Of course, I did last week. I didn't think prints above the December 22 and last week candle high were valid, but as you can see right here, extremely valid. So I'm going to take that into consideration into this coming week. Excuse me. So 1833 to 1825 is valid all day. I'm taking retest of that level all day, every day. Excuse me. No questions asked. I'm like fucking gonna die trying to get these calls out. 1803 also very valid for retest, and as always, the 1780s is valid as well. Obviously, would love to get in that 1824 more so than anything, because that is the level that's just the level that looks the cleanest to me. Like, look at all look at all these touches. It's literally like, this is the definition of a level of structure. Like, this is, has the resistance, right? Like, bumps into it as a resistance multiple times, flips it, bumps into it as support multiple times. Like, it's just a beautiful level of structure. So with that in mind, again, I'm open to 1846 longs. I'm open to 1833 longs. I'm open to 1825 longs. I'm open to 1803 longs, as well as 1786. Otherwise, like, while it's making its rounds into these different levels, I'm cool, like, sitting on my hands. Like, I'm honestly, patience isn't an issue in that regard. As far as the highs are concerned, right? If we make a dip and I don't, for whatever reason, I don't catch 1846 and we break that level of structure at 1865 once again, I'll take breaks and retests of 1865 into 1890 all day, every day. I just want to make that clear for my future self. And overall, I mean, that pretty much sums it. I think that's pretty clear. Once again, I would take breaks and retest above 1865 into 1890. I would take breaks and retest, or rather, I would take a retest of 1846 into the range high. I would take 1833 and 1825 to the range high. I would take 1803 to the range high. I would take 1786 to the range high. Super straightforward. If it's not at one of those levels, if it's not touching one of those levels, wicking on one of those levels, I am cool to sit on my hands. I'll be setting alerts. Once it gets into my level, I'll be watching it to see how it prints, how it wicks, whatever it does. But if it's not there, I'm not there. Fuck that. What am I going to be, I'm going to be sitting around while price is at, what, 1868, 1858? Like, nah, I'm cool. So with that said, that pretty much sums it for my pre-market plan. Pretty straightforward. I always say that, I try to keep it as straightforward and simple as possible for my future self. Just makes things a ton easier. And then, I mean, if you were to overcomplicate this, like if I were to have 20 indicators, like my Bollinger Band needs to be, personally, that's just not efficient. Of course, everyone's strategy is different. Everyone has what works for them, and that's completely fine. I'm not like a supply and demand maxi. You feel me? Like, it's all good. Like, if you like it, I love it. Like, different strokes for different folks for me. But with that in mind, again, this is my pre-market plan for this coming week. Future me, God bless you, bro. I hope that you're doing everything that you've ever set out to do, living to your utmost potential, living with, health, wealth, prosperity, longevity, loyalty, openness and communication, honesty in every aspect of your life, and love. And just, thank God for everything. God bless you guys. God bless everybody watching. God bless you, future me. And take care.